Well, here in San Francisco, it was predicted that we would get in the high numbers today on temperatures, 70s and 80s. But the wind has started up and it's coming right out of the west, which means cooler temperatures for us. Very hot temperatures out there near the Central Valley of California, probably in the 90s. Los Angeles will get in the high 90s. But climate change is a factor. But I wanted to put this out here because, unfortunately, the oil companies think they're going to get one over on us. They think that if they say that they're getting rid of CO2 by pumping it under the ground in the old wells, that they can keep on pumping oil and fossil fuels can continue on for virtually ever, because we'll just take all the CO2 and pump it underground. Unfortunately, that's impossible because there's too much CO2 already above ground to put it down in the ground. And we really, even though they say they have the technologies to do this, not really. Hang on a minute. It's all about bamboozling the sheep. And will the sheep buy it and start driving bigger SUVs and stuff again, even though they haven't stopped driving them? Will we ignore the climate change that's ripping around us and go ahead and believe in the oil company? This is something everybody has to put out there, is that this is nonsense. There is no such thing as getting rid of CO2 in the atmosphere in any meaningful way. It just isn't there. And that the fossil fuel industry must end, and end now. As the IPCC report says, we're at the very last minute of trying to fix this, and there's no other more warning than this, than to do something now. We can't ignore it any longer. See, if there was a way to take CO2 out of the atmosphere, the IPCC report would talk about it, and they wouldn't be saying that we have to end fossil fuels. It's just a illusion that we put over ourselves, and we seem to like to put illusions over ourselves all the time. Okay, that brings us up to our next subject, is the war going on between Russia and Ukraine, which is really most of the world against Russia. Now, unfortunately, when DT, our ex-president, pulled out of all the negotiations that we worked on so hard for so many years with Russia, he just pulled us out of it and started this whole thing as far as I'm concerned. And Putin had enough, said no more expansion of NATO. We ignored that, and instead of working with them, we just kept trying to expand NATO and threatening Russia. Well, that doesn't work. With two madmen in the White House, one in the White House and one in the Kremlin, and both of them have egos so huge that any news, regardless of what it is, was good for their ego. So they went ahead and started all this threatening and pulling out of treaties, and it's disgusting. Now Biden is saying that he's putting sanctions on Putin's daughters and other people, and I question whether this is going to do any good at all. It's just like saying you're the daughter, so you get punished as well as Putin. It sounds sort of desperation time to me, and there's got to be a negotiated settlement. Just like climate change, you've got to calm things down. You can't just keep pumping the heat, because it's just not going to work on this planet. We cannot survive thermonuclear war. There's just no way. So there's only one other way to get through this, and that's through a negotiated settlement. Instead of ratcheting up things, Biden, why don't you start negotiating? Putting ideas out there, talking about maybe pulling back a little bit on NATO, maybe putting something so Russia has something on their side to feel better about, and that way you can both pull out of this thing and stop threatening the rest of the world with your games. Your endless, I'm putting sanctions here, Russia, I'm going to attack here and massacre there. It's ridiculous that this is continuing to go on when sanctions and war are not the answer. Negotiated settlements are the only answer there's left. Same with climate change. You can't just say you're going to take CO2 out of the air and expect it to go away somehow, and then give yourselves an okay to continue on with pumping CO2 into the atmosphere uncontrollably. The same with war. War is obsolete, or has to be obsolete. War is obsolete, and always has been obsolete. War is that of madmen who get into places of power and see all these weapons at their disposal and say, okay, you pissed me off enough, I'm going to use these weapons, feeding the military-industrial complex to a higher and higher degree. Do you know how close we are to thermonuclear war? About that much. We're very, very close, very, very close to thermonuclear war and climate collapse. Right now, California's suffering a very bad heat wave when we need to be greener about all this. And because we have fire season here coming up any day now, it's going to start up. And what will be the next town that burns? Where will back east, what towns will be wiped out by tornadoes and hurricanes during the summer? And on and on and on. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And the leaders avoid all this stuff so they don't see it. Or they go and they look at it afterwards and give us pretty speeches and all. But in reality, things are heating up to a point where things need to be negotiated down, ratcheted down. People should be out in the streets saying, negotiate, negotiate. Forget all these sanctions and all this nonsense, which is not going to do a thing. Just prolong the problem. Negotiated settlements are the way to go. And that's today's video, is that we need to start using the brain instead of the ass of the human. But then again, why would we do that when the military-industrial complex is reaping so much profit from all this? And all the gamblers out there who put their money into stocks, put their money into the military-industrial complex, feeding it even more and more. Feeding and feeding and feeding the endless want to go to war and keep making more and more deadlier weapons. So, I'm going to go up here. The wind was really whipping, now it's starting to calm back down. That means it's going to get really warm today. I appreciate all the last comments on your video, on the last video. Your ups, the down, the new subscribers. And until next time.